But we felt the warmth of home when we came through that door. Joanne and I spent the end of 2013 and beginning of 2014 here when I did my training at SMAT, and we built some very close friendships. So it's so great to be back. Riverside Fellowship has a special place in our hearts, not just for those for the friendships that we've built, but this church has stood behind us, and we are in the mission field now because, not only because, but a major reason is that you guys have helped us and supported us, and really we wouldn't be there if this church hadn't done that. So we do really appreciate it, and we are excited to come back and just share a little bit of what God is doing in Guyana.
For those who haven't met us, we're from South Africa, and we're serving in South America. And the country is Guyana, not to be confused with Ghana in Africa. So it's Guyana in South America, the only English-speaking country in South America. The Father from his throne beholds those who do these acts of mercy and numbers them with his most precious treasures. And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels. That's what we want. We want to be counted as his most precious treasure. There it is, top of the map, South America. There are 3 Guyanas. It's the English Guyana that we're in, and then there's the Dutch Guyana next to us, moving eastwards, and then it's French Guyana.
Suriname.
Yeah, the Dutch Guyana is called Suriname, but we're the furthest over on the left. This is what the landscape looks like. Some of these slides may be familiar to you, but just to keep that in your mind, this is a terrain where there are no roads to get to this village. We live in the uppermost corner of Guyana, and the only alternative to air is boat. You can take the 26-hour journey from our little village, Mabaruma, to the capital. And most of that journey is on the open sea. The tropical weather conditions mean it's rainy season or dry season. There are no winters there. Lots of mosquitoes. And rain comes anytime. I've been caught many times without an umbrella. It's just very unpredictable, but those showers come. We have about 90 to 140 inches of rain per year. So people catch rainwater. That's the most stable form of water is from the sky. It just rains down buckets, literally. But you can imagine for aviation, it's a very dense world out there with all those trees. They call it the broccoli. And this is on the ridge, our little village, Mabaruma. It's very spread out. You can't see much of it in this picture. It's spread out. It reaches along the river. There are a lot of river communities. But this is pretty much the heart of the village. And you can't see the marketplace. That's another center. The runway is not far from the heart of this. This main road is pretty much the one road in the town that leads through the whole town that's spread out along the ridge.
Okay, aviation. This is my department. When we first got to Guyana, this was the plane that we went to. It's a Cessna 182. Last time I shared a few things. I don't know if Jim would remember, but it's the most important modifications that they've made to this plane to make it user-friendly for the environment is that it's got big tires for the runways, the rough runways. It's got a stall kit, short takeoff and landing, so that the wing is actually modified so that we can take off quicker and fly slower. And then the other important modification is that the back seats fold away. So we can actually put a patient lying down in the back, and that really helps. And usually I have one seat in place for the doctor or nurse to sit next to the patient, and then the patient lying down. Well, that's if they need to lie down. This was a plane. It looks almost identical to the other one, and it arrived on our project last year. So this is I actually did the first flight into the interior, picked it up in Georgetown, and flew it out to Mabaruma. And it has the same paint scheme, it has the same important modifications, and there you see both planes sitting next to each other on the runway. Next to the runway here. As the pilot on the project, you might say, why do you need two planes? Because I'm the only pilot there. Well, we are looking for more pilots. So we actually may be looking at some that are going through SMAT at the moment. We're hoping maybe one could come down. We're not sure where he would go. Brendan, I think he's going through, but we've got some mechanics going through there too. I just heard that there's 6 Adventists that are at SMAT at the moment. So we're excited about that. 3 of them I know are interested in, or at least 2 have joined Adventist World Aviation, and 1 is interested in that. And I'm not sure about the other 3. I haven't met them yet. But here we are. I'm sitting in the plane getting ready for a flight. It's my responsibility to make these flights and make it happen. And the type of flying that we normally do there, we work closely with the local government. Now, we're based in Region 1. Guyana is divided up into 10 regions. We up in the northwest corner, as Joanne said. And we mainly work with Region 1. We will take the chairman of and his deputy, or even the regional executive officer, his deputy, or whoever it is. Even we have engineers that will fly around, and so we'll take them to other villages where they'll need to be in order to help the local villages. They'll have meetings there, maybe to even check on their building construction projects, like they've been building a school and a hospital in a village. We'll take them there so that they can oversee it, things like that. We also do their payroll. Once a month, we'll fly their strong box. We'll pick it up in Georgetown, full of cash. They don't have banks out in the village. Actually, I think there's one village that has a bank in it because of all the gold that's there. So but other than that, pretty much all the other villages have no banks. So we will take their payroll for the government workers, like doctors and nurses, teachers, and we'll drop that off. We'll fly the full circuit around our region, flying into each strip, dropping off the money, and then coming back. So that's... Then we work with missionaries. If missionaries want to come and and get to some of these places, we make it possible for them to be able to get there. We also we try to make ourselves available as well to the local pastor. He's got a big area to cover, and it's hard for him to get around. If he requests a flight from us, we'll do it we'll do it as cheaply as we can. We give him half price. We only charge for the fuel. That's to the government. We only charge the fuel. We give it the rest of it as a service. To the church, we fly 50%. We'll give them half price. So we really make it easier for them. Then we also do a service for the locals when they lose their loved ones. We will fly their loved ones back to them so that they can bury because the boats don't have refrigerations, so we'll do that for them, and they can have closure to that. A very important part of what we do. Not a very nice. I don't enjoy doing those flights because you're dealing with people that have lost their loved ones, but they do know that we care for them. Other than that, we've got to do these medical evacuations, and that's where I'll say the government pays half of our, they pay our fuel, and I thought we'd just give you a few stories here, a few pictures, so you get the feel of what it's like. I'm on call during daylight hours. We don't fly at night. because the government doesn't allow single-engine planes to fly at night. But any time during the day, I could get a call, and I've got to drop everything and go. Normally, if they give me a call, I'll normally say, okay, I'll be ready in maybe 30 minutes or so, and I'll get to the plane, do the pre-flight, and we'll be good to go. Here's a baby with respiratory issues on oxygen, and we flew this baby out. This one had pneumonia, and we were able to, also on oxygen, there, this little girl in the plane, and getting ready for the flight, the doctor just doing its final checks here. And this little girl, Katiana, I remember she was having serious fevers, actually unconscious at the time. I flew her and her father and a doctor into Georgetown. Nurse. You can see the nurse standing there. And this lady here was bleeding from the stomach. And she was losing a lot of blood very quickly. They didn't have extra blood for her in the village. They had one unit that they had connected her up to. That was that was the last unit they had for her. And they said, if we don't get her into Georgetown quickly, she's not going to be with us very long. So I remember this flight especially because it was early morning. You can see the mist there still on the runway. And the internet wasn't working, so I didn't have any weather information. We get very little we only get the satellite imaging on the internet, but this morning the internet wasn't working, and I remember calling up air traffic control and asking them, what is the weather like over in Georgetown? And they said there's been thunderstorms coming through from early this morning. And where we were, it was all clear, and I thought, well, I don't know where I'm going to meet these thunderstorms, but I was praying. And we loaded her in the aircraft, and I took off, and about halfway to Georgetown, I met this wall of cloud that went from the trees up into the sky, and as far left and right as I could see. I tried going underneath, I tried left, I tried right, and finally I decided that I would have to divert and land because I didn't know what was inside. The evidence was there were thunderstorms inside. And so I decided just to land, and that was a stressful 30 minutes while we were on the ground. I had an airport close by. The doctor was stressed, everyone was, but after 30 minutes I prayed. I said, let's give it another try. We took to the air again and was able to penetrate some of the clouds, go through, and get enough visibility to go through safely. And I just praised the Lord for that. But that just gives you an idea of what it's like to fly in these places. I can go on for the rest of the service telling you how God has protected and had his hand over the plane as we've been flying over the jungle, where you go into the cloud and you just see a flash. You know there's lightning, you know there's thunderstorm, but you don't know where to turn. And I would just like to thank also Jim who initiated it, but also the church for standing behind, because this church has now sponsored a storm scope or a strike finder to go in the plane, and I'm going to have information, weather information, while I fly. And that's going to take a lot of stress off me, as well as Joanne, I'm sure. So thank you so much. It means a lot. I've seen the unit. It was at Adventist World Aviation. They're just getting the wiring harness sorted out, and I plan to have it in my suitcase and take it down when we go down there and do the installation. So there are better days for flying in Guyana. This lady here had a snake bite to her ankle. I remember once I did 3 flights all in a row of snake bites. One time of the year the snakes were biting. But this one was also a snake bite victim, getting loaded up here in the plane. Pregnancy complication. We flew this lady in. She was in labor but couldn't deliver. I know the previous pilot, Greg, who had the same situation, but when he got up to 5,000 feet, the woman delivered the baby in the plane. I have not had that experience yet. So here, this little boy, well, it was a boating accident. Two boats collided. One was coming out of a creek into the main river, and he experienced a very bad head injury. At this point, he was in and out of consciousness, and he couldn't speak, but there were good results that came after his flight to the capital. He was able to get the help he needed. This man, he was drunk, and he landed on the flywheel of the boat engine and cut his back and lost a lot of blood. We had to move quickly and get him into the Georgetown as soon as we could. And another man here you can see with a head injury. This man had a bowel obstruction. And then we have a tuberculosis case. The other air carriers will not fly a TB case, but we do. We put on the masks and we pray for God's protection, and we give this man an opportunity to get the help he needs, and others too.
Also chickenpox.
Okay, yes, I've flown chickenpox cases as well. I think it was a complication because usually we wouldn't evacuate a chickenpox case, but yeah, the first thing the doctor asked me was, "Have you had chickenpox?" I said yes. He said okay, so I could do that. Maintenance. Traditionally, this is how we've done maintenance. I am the mechanic on the project. We're also looking for help in this way as well, but I have to take on the responsibility of mechanic. And there's Rebecca and I, that was the previous year, doing maintenance. But we just want to give you an idea how it was done. We do it under the open skies, or we put a tarp over the top if we've got a lot to do, and just to protect from that high rainfall and the hot sun. And Nick Nagy is familiar. You're familiar with him. He comes down once a year to do our annual inspection, as he's the aircraft. He's an inspector now, aircraft inspector, and so he's qualified to do that yearly check on the plane. And that's some of the challenges that we've had in the past of rain falling on our heads when we're trying to work. But now we want to show you what has happened in the past year when it comes to construction, because this has made a huge difference to the way we do things. Here's Larry Gavai, and he's from North Carolina. He's a builder, and he came down to help us erect a hangar for our planes. The hangar was put into a 20-foot container here in the States by Adventist World Aviation and shipped down. We had all kinds of challenges to get it onto the boat, and then from the boat, when it got to Maburuma in the village, we had to get it from the boathouse up to where it was going to be put up at the airport. And Larry Cratterton actually was there at the time last year, and he helped to get it up, the container. So now you see the area that we were going to build, and Larry Gavai was there to oversee the construction. Tom, what was his last name? Megan. Tom Megan also came down with him to give a hand, and it was all hands on deck to get this prefab hangar up. The parts had to be bolted together, and we had these long steel trusses that had to go up, and then we had the challenge of how do we get them up there. The original idea was that we would just use manpower to lift, and these things were so long and floppy, and we thought, how will we get it up there? And Joanne thought, why don't we go down and ask the the powerhouse where they have the generator, they had this truck with a crane, the only one in Mabaruma. It wasn't telescoping anymore, but they said, sure, we'll come and help you. And so they came down and were able to lift these trusses into place. Here you see, going up, and then the roof going on. And this was a great day as the roof was going on, but it wasn't without incident, because we had two local guys from sort of just finishing high school, and they had time on their hands, and we said, come help us. And his name was Jerry. Jerry was on the roof, and we were pulling these sheets up, the roof sheets up, to put in place. And he, I guess, didn't realize exactly how close he was to the edge of the roof. And he turned around. Actually, I heard him yell. I was on the ground. I looked up to see him come off the roof. And he didn't land on his feet. He landed on his knee, his leg, his hip, and then his head hit and on concrete. About 15 feet he fell. And our hearts sunk, because this was just, we gathered around him, prayed for him, because we were sure that he was going to have broken bones or something really serious with his head. He hit his head very hard. They took him to the local hospital, gave him x-rays, and reported that he had no broken bones. So we were so relieved. But with his head injury, his eyesight was all blurred in his left eye. And so we were concerned. They said he needed to go to Georgetown, get a scan done. And so he went to Georgetown, got the scan, and we were so relieved to find out that there was nothing serious, nothing major. And since that, he's recovered. His eyesight has come back properly. And
no hemorrhage, nothing.
Yes, it could have been a very bad situation. The Lord was looking after him and after us all, really. And here he is. He was just about, at this point, he was feeling okay to walk around, and we took a picture of him just before he was taken to Georgetown for the scan for his eye. But at the end of the hangar project, here it is, two planes sitting next to each other. And we are so happy for this. That shipping container is coming in useful. We've put it in place, and inside we put some shelves and a workbench. I've built a little wooden workbench inside that. Lockable space. We can put our tools and our parts in here, and it just transforms the way we do maintenance. And here's an aircraft mechanic in the training. Looking forward when she can help. But this, while we've been away, Nick Nagy and Tom Megan went down to do the annual inspection on the two aircraft. And there is Bruce next to him, and he is the project manager. He handles all the other things on the project. Him and his wife. And so they were so happy for this hangar to have been put up, because they could work in peace and in comfort out of the elements. And
this is the learning center, or the community center, that the Wilkersons, Bruce and Monique, built through locals' help. And I'm just giving you an updated picture of what it looks like, because Riverside Fellowship sponsored towards this building, and it's been a big blessing. They have their house upstairs, and downstairs is a worship hall, a church, but also a tutoring center, a place for Bible studies, a venue for weddings. Everything can happen there, and it's a great blessing. It could also be accommodation if mission groups come in. And you can see now the stairs are completed, and they're putting retaining walls up there in front just to level the area, because it's been sloping down. And it's looking beautiful. They've also completed the floor inside, You can see the adults meet one side and the children on the other. And they have a lovely mural for the children. One of the artists, one of the missionaries who came and stood in for us, his wife painted that. And they're looking to get a dividing wall now, a movable structure, so that they can get the kids their own corner. But meetings are continuing here, and we're thankful that this group is growing and attendance is consistent, and they're being blessed with this lovely building. So apart from aviation, apart from other construction projects, with all of those things aside, the real reason is to share Christ. To share Christ, the reason we go out to these remote places is to somehow make a difference, and it's hard. You see alcoholism, you see poverty, you see idleness, you see lack of purpose. There's a high suicide rate among the teens, especially. Actually, Guyana, on some charts, has the highest suicide rate in the world. And we fly into one of the worst villages, barometer, where the suicide is the highest in Guyana, in this place. A more violent Amerindian tribe. And Darren came across once flying into that village 2 youths in the police office, police station, and the deputies and the chair people he was flying in there, they wondered, why are these youths here? And they questioned, only to find out that these two, aged 9 and 11, had almost axed a man the day before. We don't know the reasons why they had been violent, but they didn't know what to do with them. They were too young to lock up in jail, but they're watching violent black market DVDs, and they're seeing things. They're frustrated because they see a better life outside of the jungle, and there's very little opportunity inside the jungle and in these little villages. So emotions run high, but we feel safe where we are. But Barometer is more of a rough area that Darren flies into. But we're thankful that we've had no incidents. And the angels have watched over us. And Darren has never had the plane break down in any of these locations. He's had electrical issues go wrong. He's had small things go out on him, but it's been either coming into home base or going out. And so we've just been so thankful for when these things happen, because it could mean boat rides and days stuck out in remote places. Would you like to tell the story of the vacuum pump going out on you?
I can share that one. You know, the Lord has his hand over us all the time. And I do a lot of praying when I fly. The one day I was doing the payroll. So we had the strong box, and we had picked it up from Georgetown. And we were flying to the village. We fly to Mabaruma first, and then before we hit all the other little airstrips in the area. And as I was flying, I flew through a lot of cloud and a lot of turbulence, being thrown around quite a bit. And I remember on the descent, I was coming out, and I descended, broke cloud base, and it wasn't far. I could see Mabaruma off in the distance. There was the runway, and I said, and as I got close, I just felt something was different, and I wasn't sure exactly what it was. And after a little bit, I looked up and I saw that my vacuum pump had gone out, which means it's a vacuum pump powers the artificial horizon, or the direction, and the directional gyro. And so without those things, we can fly the plane in the cloud, but it becomes very challenging. And if you fly through turbulence, it can be almost impossible to keep the plane upright if you don't have those instruments. I mean, it depends on the level of turbulence. If it's calm, it's much easier. But I had been flying through a lot of turbulence, and now it popped out, and my vacuum pump went out just at that point. When I had visibility, it wasn't any issue when it comes to the operation of the plane. I could land visually. I came in, landed, and I just thanked the Lord. I said, what a time for it to go out. If it had gone out 20 minutes earlier, or 15 minutes, or just 5 minutes earlier, it could have been really a bad situation. But the Lord held it together just until I broke out of the cloud, and then he let it go.
Amen. In fact, there have been some recent aircraft accidents in Guyana, two airplane crashes in the last 2 weeks, I think it is. One of them was the GMI plane, and just to give you an example of how the Gospel Ministries International, that's the David Gates operation. Beside us, we work together. We know the pilot. They operate mostly out of Region 7. So the pilot had a body of a missionary to fly in, and they had been delayed because of a policeman who was escorting this body. We don't know if he was using extra. He wasn't leaning the mixture. Am I saying this right? He was using extra fuel because he was in a hurry to get to his destination in the capital. We don't know, but he was running out of time because single engines have to be on the ground by sunset. They've got to be down, and he left late from their base, going to the capital, and they actually ran out of fuel 12 miles before the capital, and it was after dark. Landing in the jungle after dark, I mean, just landing in the jungle alone is high risk. It's just covered with trees, but somehow they managed to get the plane down in brush rather than trees. I think they said there was a bit of moonlight, and it was around 7 when the plane went down. They were able to telephone. Amazingly, they had signal where they were. They were able to telephone for help, and help arrived around midnight. They sent in helicopters, the helicopter from the Guyana Defense Force, also people by boat and by foot to help them. But it took 5 hours to reach them. When the helicopter landed, it took them about an hour just to get to that location, as close as they could. You know, the helicopter went, and they still had to hike an hour to get the pilot out and the policeman. And thankfully, the Lord had His hand over them, and they were not so severely injured that they survived the accident. And they were taken out on stretchers, flown back to, I think one had a broken leg, and Lincoln, the pilot, had injury to his jaw and arm, I believe. But they really believe that God's hand was over them, and they survived that incident. But this is the nature. It's very dense, the jungle, and help. That was just 12 miles from the capital. So help isn't necessarily right available if something like that happens. So prayer is a major part of our mission and ministry. But thankfully we have no incident on our record, and that is just the Lord's mercy. That is our record. But safety is important. We're getting a safety audit this year later on, and so they will inspect everything we do, and Darren is going to be cross-questioned. But thankfully we can do our part, but it's the Lord ultimately that does protect that aircraft. But aside from that, I keep going back to aviation, but aside from that, the outreach that we do in the community is growing. We're trying to get deeper inroads, getting to know people more. The culture is different. You feel like an outsider. Everyone has their connections. Their family lives down the road, and everyone's related, it seems, to each other. And even though it's English, the English is different too. You've got to listen carefully to understand what they're saying, because sometimes on the phone we don't know what they're saying. But some of the outreach that we seek to do is to reach out to the children. We make time for this. This was a busy morning, but they asked, please take the little kids from school who want to be pilots. Take them and show them your plane. This was career day at school, and these little guys came and inspected the plane. They were so excited. And in any way we can give the children hope, we try to do that. We give out backpacks. I didn't include those pictures. We give out backpacks with school supplies, encourage them to stay in school. There's a huge dropout rate. And many of the kids, 12 years old, don't know how to read. Their parents don't read. And in Sabbath school, you have to be careful who you ask to read Bible verses, because many of them cannot. And our Sabbath school is an outreach. Many community children come to our Sabbath school group from week to week. The parents don't attend church, but they send their children. And they learn Bible stories, they learn verses, songs, and they do little crafts. And we have a great time. I have a wonderful assistance from our little group in Thomas Hill. It's a different group from where the center worships. It's lower down in the valley. And we also do annual VBS. This girl on the right with the white shirt, her name's Lynn. She has been an amazing help. She has vision for the children. She's very self-sacrificing. Everything on her heart is about the children, and she's been a wonderful helper. Now when I'm away, she runs the children's classes. And this was a little recorder group we put together for VBS, for the older kids, and we played a song or two for the first Sabbath after that, and we had a lot of fun with the recorders, and they got to keep their recorders after that. I believe we showed you this last time, the dental outreach pictures, but this is a huge need also on the rivers. We have not had them visiting again. They went to Philippines, this group, the last year, but we hope they'll come again to Mavaruma and our region. But we had a wonderful turnout, a wonderful mission group come down, do dental work on patients, seeing hundreds each day for about 5 days on the river. And that was Dr. Dahl and Dr. Jonathan. One is from the US, one's from Canada, and they came with assistants and did a lot of dental work. And then we do small therapies in homes as we can. I think I did share this last time with you about the hydro, hot and cold treatments. You can get ice in the village. We now have our own freezers, so we can make ice, but you can imagine in this heat, how do you do hot and cold? But it's effective. These treatments are effective. We've seen results. This lady had a big abscess here, and it drained the second day after we did this hot treatment on her neck with the warm compress. And then this man, we did share a previous time about his incident with a coconut falling on his foot, huge swelling. We did hot and cold. We saw the results, and we look for more opportunities to do this ministry. We're not medical professionals, but they look to the pilots and the foreigners, and they believe that we can help them in some way or another. And where the hospital doesn't cover, we might step in and do this sort of thing, go into homes. And a more recent development is the sewing classes. And you might have heard about that, and this church is already giving some materials, sewing materials, fabrics, zippers, seam rippers and things, machines. This church is already sponsoring machines to go and help the communities. There's a lot of time on their hands. We send these down in barrels, and the ladies have a lot of fun. I didn't take a lot of pictures, and we've had a great attendance from time to time, but this is inside the Thomas Hill Church. It's a one-room church, but it has desks and it has benches, which work great for the sewing machines. And it's a ministry. It's also a time when the ladies can get to know each other. For me, it's wonderful. I learned the culture. And the ladies make things. They made little Christmas bags for the children to put gifts in. They want to make clothes for the children who attend the Sabbath school class. They also do some of their own mending. I sewed a tie we helped a lady sew a tie for her son's school uniform. Anything, alterations. It's a lovely time. We get together and we sew. And the power comes on, the village power generator comes on at 5 o'clock in the evening, because we don't have power 24/7. So when the power comes on, we meet twice a week, Tuesday nights and Sunday nights. And to give you an example of the electrical connection, it's not always dependable. I plugged in an iron once and everything went black. The fuse boxes are almost non-existent, and little wires in the box and in the house, but Darren was able to come and step in when the electrician was too busy to fix it, and we've got a better setup now. But we do want to get the church's own connection directly from the pole, because we're going through a house right now and things can go black on us and then we have to cancel sewing. But we're thankful when it works, and we've had a great time together. And this is simple, but it's able to touch people. It shows that you care. And one of the ladies, I think she's 50 years old, she's been attending our church, she is baptized, and she's just said, thank you for the sewing, thank you for teaching us this. But more than teaching, I don't feel like a teacher, it's actually just making it available. They don't have machines. Making it available so that they can do the sewing. And this is what we want to do in more communities. We want to expand this project We want to set up sewing machines in the center, the lifestyle center, in that location. Also with the new refugees that have come across from Venezuela, we want to set up sewing projects there, because there are a lot of ladies, although they don't speak English, they can sew. And so I'll show you pictures of those people also. The soap making is something we're continuing. Other missionaries showed us how to do it. There's a lot of coconuts in the village. It's one of the natural resources. They know how to make coconut oil. It's hard work though. They've got to grate that coconut down, make it into milk, coconut milk, and then they've got to let it stand overnight, bring it to a boil, the oil comes to the top, take that oil, and then the soap has caustic soda added to it, and we show them a very simple recipe, and they make it by stirring it. It sets up lovely, and they can either use it or sell it, little industry for them. So some people have really run with this, and they want me to bring back scent from America. Bring us scent. We want it to add to our soap. So then this is the latest need in our area. Not far from us is an area called Khan Hill, and people from the Venezuelan border called the Waro people have been coming across in numbers. Right now it's been estimated about 1,500 displaced people. The Waro tribe literally translates people of the boat. They love their dugout canoes, they're fishermen folk, they're simple, they live on starched vegetables and sugar. They actually live on whatever they can survive, but they're simple people, and they have been coming across. Their needs are huge. Their housing is terrifying to see the conditions they're living under. It's really shocking. Kids, women living in these makeshift shelters, no walls on the sides. It's really appalling. They're sort of making these structures using cutlasses, and I think they've been given chainsaws by the government, who is also trying to help. But our Adventist World Aviation leadership, Judd Wickwire, who is the vice president and was in Guyana himself for about 5 years, appealed to ADRA Canada for help. And they have done an assessment of the need. Because these people don't have food, their money is now worthless. They didn't have much money, but coming from Venezuela, the currency just plunged. And we've reached out to them in a very small scale, giving them some food and clothing and personal items, but it's bigger than us. And when you see the need in the people's eyes, it touches your heart. You see groups of people walking down, the rain will pour down, no umbrellas, kids half naked, no shoes. And when we first go to our village, we think the people there are struggling, but when you see another level of poverty coming in, where even the villagers are looking and staring, it's another whole category altogether. You see them in the marketplace, walking through, their eyes big, looking in the stores, but they just keep walking. They don't go in. They pretty much trade with their fishers, with certain dealers, certain stores will trade with them, more like a bartering system. And when we visited them, they said they hadn't eaten in 3 days. So I've never had that feeling. I've never had that feeling. I haven't, never run out of food. But that's what they said. So it was quite urgent. And we did send them a big bag of rice more than once, and basics. This lady's doing her washing, just a feel of their little community. But this is typically how all the villagers do their washing. Like we saw in that mission spotlight, an elderly gentleman. They're simple people, but yet they have a contentment on their faces, and they're happy with life. They can still smile, even though their needs are huge. The kids' faces really tear at your heart. And in a small way, we've been involved with Bible studies. We've been holding weekly studies at our little Thomas Hill church. Darren has been doing that on a Wednesday nights. And basically the church members were asking, please teach us, what does it mean to be an Adventist? Why are we Adventists? Teach us why we exist. And Darren thought for a bit, and he wasn't sure what angle to take. And then he thought, I'm going to teach them the lessons from the Old Testament sanctuary model and go into that it's visual for them. Teach them what lessons we can draw out of that. How the gospel how the gospel message ties into that message. And they've just loved it. They didn't even know what the great disappointment was, and concepts that we're so familiar with. But he's been going into it, and also into Daniel from there, and prophecies. And they've just asked him. His one friend, Lloyd, has been saying, will you pick me up for Wednesday Bible study? I want to come. And Lloyd has come from a Catholic background. His family is not religious at all, really. And when he requested baptism in the Adventist church, he requested his marriage in the Adventist church, his family was not pleased. He works for his grandmother on her farm. But Lloyd has embraced this message. He's been reading The Great Controversy with his wife. And since we've been away, he keeps in touch with us. He says happy Sabbath to us, and he has a struggle in his life, but we want Jesus to be real for him. He has ups and downs. We wrote a story in one of our newsletters of how over the Heritage Month he was tempted with alcohol. They make a local brew, and it was amusing to us because later we saw that his suffering was a blessing in disguise. But he was basically planting on the farm, and one of his neighbors comes to him and says, hey, have something to drink, gives him one of the local drinks that they brew at home, and he accepted it. We were planning to visit him the same day. It was a Sabbath. He accepted the drink, and he wasn't attending church then yet, but he was convicted, and he knew we were visiting, but he drank this stuff. And before we went, we called and we said, is that okay? Can we come? He knew we were coming. But when we got to the top of the hill, we heard shouting and we heard stomping in the house. He lives in a valley, and we thought, we don't know of any neighbors around him. What is the sound we're hearing? And we thought, do we go down? Do we not go down to visit him? What are we going to do? And we called again, and he said, no, come on, you're welcome. Come and visit us. And we went down, and he just basically said, I'm sorry, this is what's happened. I made a big mistake, and it made him violent, this brew that he took. His wife was, you could see she'd had tears in her face, and their little kid is just older than Rosanna. He has his struggles, but at that time, we knew it was a bad time. We felt that vibe, but yet he welcomed us in. We prayed with him. He was totally open, and he saw that he's in the midst of this struggle. We explained, look, this is something that you can't do alone. This is something you have in your genes. And he was willing to surrender. He was willing to say, I can't do this. This is bigger than me. He admitted that, and we prayed for him. And he wants to be baptized. He wants to join the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He feels that this is his church. This is his home, and that is him. He did help a little bit with the hangar construction. He's young, he loves history, and so pray for Lloyd and his family. He's not without struggle. We don't have huge numbers that we've brought to the evangelistic campaigns or anything, but we have one or two that are sincere, that are dedicated, and as we witness in this community, we just seek that our witness will be expanded and more will see the light. Because the devil's hold is very strong in these places. And one more slide here is a picture of a lady who did get baptized, and also Lynn, the lady who helps me with the Sabbath schools, she herself has not made a commitment. She's a great help with the church, but she has not taken that step to be baptized. And so in this latest evangelistic campaign that pastors came and did in our region, she did make a decision to be baptized, and we're thankful for that. It was a struggle. The pastor threw it out there, and she didn't want to be baptized because her home church is a different congregation, and she didn't quite see that need to move over. Yet she attends and worships with us. She's been attending 2 churches, but she made a decision to be baptized, and we pray for her that she'll continue growing in her walk with the Lord and seeing why we exist as an Adventist church. Why do we worship on Sabbath? And she also was reading The Great Controversy, and she was sharing with a colleague what she'd been reading. And her colleague said, I want that book. I want to get it and start reading. And so this is how it goes in the village. One light goes on and another light goes on, and slowly people get on fire for the Lord. Speaking of fires, that was not intentional. When we went to South Africa, this is just in wrapping up some experiences that we had, just to share some lessons out of it. We went to South Africa, and about 8 days later, there was a fire on our hillside. We live in a valley. Darren's parents own a large section of property, but it's a high fire risk area. This bush is called fynbos. It's where proteas grow. Some of you might know the protea flower, but it's just wild country. You can't just plant anything there. It's mountainous and it's steep, but it's very dry. They've been going through a drought, and everything was very, very high fire risk right now. We were not prepared for a fire. Our water supply had gone low from the spring we were taking water from. In fact, it actually ran dry, and Darren had been rerouting water to the river, but Darren's parents ran out of water, and the water tanks were just about this full, and we saw this fire, and we had just been saying we are in no ways prepared for a fire, but there was a fire that broke out from lightning after a storm on the mountain. And so we packed our bags ready to evacuate. It was 2 a.m. We packed the bags, and we were just starting to load the vehicle when rain started to fall. And so we thought, praise the Lord, it's raining, and the fire was put out, and we just sighed a sigh of relief that the fire was out. But our joy was short-lived, because about 4 days later, the fire somehow flared up again. And this time, it started spreading, moving down slowly. Friday was the day, and the helicopter tried, the wind was in our favor, the helicopter tried to put the fire out. It was dropping pockets along the fire line, but the fire was progressing faster than what the helicopter could work. And the fire got away from the helicopter, and Darren was monitoring the winds. He's checking, when is the wind due to change? Friday afternoon was good, but early hours of the morning, Sabbath, the wind was to change and come towards us. And we didn't get much sleep that night. Darren kept setting his alarm, watching how low this fire was coming. But we sort of hesitated to pack our bags. We didn't quite think we're going to need to evacuate. We're just going to watch it and see what happens. And we thought we had time. We thought, we'll get out. But that fire moved very quickly. And once it was on the plateau and we couldn't see the progress, the wind by then had changed direction. And Darren went up early that morning. He had climbed to see it. It was definitely progressing towards us. But I think that was 6 a.m. when he climbed the ridge. By 8 a.m., he heard a roar. He went out to the workshop. He heard the fire coming with a roar. It was just getting furious. And this wildfire was nothing to play with. He quickly notified his parents, get out. We started packing our bags frantically. There wasn't time to pack anything huge, just quickly throw things into bags. There was no time to get stressed. A fire engine came up the valley and said, you've got to evacuate. They recorded our voices, so they have evidence we were going to evacuate our places. And on their way down, they said, 10 minutes, get out. And we left shortly afterwards. We got one vehicle load out, and I don't know if you know that feeling of just you not knowing what you're going to go back to. It's just like you just leave yourself, you resign yourself to whatever has to happen. And as the fireman later said, he said it's like being in a current. You don't know which way you're going to be taken, but you just go. And this fire swept through our valley. We went to a lower farm. We waded out. Smoke was everywhere. Even where we were wading, it was so thick. we thought the houses and the cabins, we have a little cabin, his parents have a house, everything was wooden of our buildings. Not a good building material for a high fire hazardous region, but the fire swept through, we thought everything was gone, but the part that we didn't know was that God had his hand over our property. We didn't expect it. We didn't expect that mercy, but he saved our places. And when we went back, it was all standing. It was still there. And the amazing thing is the fire was 360 around our places, wooden structures. And the firemen themselves said, this is amazing. This is a miracle. Wooden structures in the center of the blaze. How is that possible? And they tell the story to other firemen to encourage them. But the amazing thing was Chris, the fireman who stayed, went up to get some pets of Darren's parents, the dog and the cat that had escaped. And he was going to leave. He was going to get out there and leave the fire to do its duty. He was not staying. It was too dangerous because of a gorge and the way the fire was coming. But one of our church members went up. His own fire equipment had been taken in a previous fire. He only had an old pair of jeans, and he had a gas mask, and he was claiming the ground. He said, Lord, these are your workers, and this is all they have. And he went up and he started beating the fire. The fireman, Chris, gave him materials, he gave him his beater, and together they stuck it out. Chris said, I'm not going to leave him here, I can't leave him here. So Chris stayed, and Henny, this church member, our friend, stayed. And Darren and us were down in the valley. We had unpacked the vehicle. Darren tried to get back up the valley, but there was no way he could get back. The smoke was too dense, and we didn't know. Our friend Henny was up there, and he said, no, I'm staying. And actually, he watched Darren's parents' place. Our cabin, they said the angels watched. One farmer did come and spray water. He had a tractor that he sprayed. A sprayer was on it, ready for fires. He sprayed it down. But there were no fire breaks in place. We were very, very unprepared. Like I said, the water situation, very little water in the tanks. Darren's parents' property actually caught on fire on the roof. And Henny heard this crack on the roof, the asbestos sheeting. And Chris had gone for water in their vehicle. He'd come back after about an hour. And it was then that Henny heard this crack. He was able to put out the fire with the water Chris had just brought, and the house was saved. And it was just a miracle looking at the whole scenario. But the lesson that we get out of this is that we knew that fire was coming. We were not prepared as far as fire breaks, and that's another lesson. But we knew the fire was coming. We saw the danger, but we thought we had more time. We thought, we'll pack, we'll get our bags ready, we'll get out of there. But it just came so suddenly. And in two events in our lives recently, this fire and what happened, what Darren's going to share about Christy's birth, these two events are telling us that we might see danger coming, we might think we have time, but we're still caught unprepared. And so I'm going to wrap it up after Darren shares the story of Christy's birth and what happened there.
Okay, this is just a short story. I know we've gone over time here, but I know you'll appreciate it. And that was when Christy was born. Joanne went into labor, and we knew that the time was drawing close. So we went to the hospital, and we waited. It took a bit of time. We waited the whole day. And by about 5 o'clock, now Joanne's family had come also to be with us at this time. And they had gone with us to town. They had been that support throughout the day. And now the children were getting tired and needed to eat. And so they said, why don't you take us home back to the cabin, and we can just take care of the kids. So I was like, I didn't want to miss the birth of our baby. So I said, okay, let me just check. I went to the nurse. I said, nurse, I know it's hard to tell, but do you know what time, give me an estimate what time the baby will come? And this was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She said, no, the baby won't come for a while. It's going to be like 9 o'clock before that baby comes. So I said, okay. And I told Joanne, I said, I'll be back soon. And Joanne's mom stayed with her, and I took the rest of the family, drove them back to the farm. On the way, the peat was still burning. That's in the sort of rivers, in the river, and a tree had fallen over the road. We were able to get past, but we had to lift the branches out the way, and I had somebody else drive the vehicle underneath. But on the way, I was coming back alone, so I grabbed a saw and I cut up the branches so that I could pass by on the way back to town. And when I got to the hospital, we don't have very good cell phone signal on the farm, but when I got to the door of the hospital, all these messages started coming through. Come quickly, the baby's coming. And I was like, I'm here, it's okay, I'm here. And I came into the hospital, and they said, as I saw the nurse, she said, the baby's born. I said, no, it can't be. And it was like 15 minutes ago, Christy had been born. And I was just, I was so sad that I'd missed the moment, but we also learned the same lesson that we had learned just a few weeks before, that we don't know the time when these things are going to happen, or we don't know the time when Christ is going to come.
And this is just to wrap up. We don't know how much time we have left. We know Christ is coming, and this is a message to us as believers. We know He is coming. We're not like the antediluvians that say there is no flood coming, although many do say that. Christ is coming. His coming is close. We see the signs around us. We see climate change. We see devastation, hurricanes. We see droughts, fires. We experienced an earthquake right there in Guyana. We know the signs are around us. But in the face of a big event, let's not get complacent thinking we have more time. The last events will be rapid ones. And so let's make every moment count. Let's be faithful. Let's press together. Let's be the people, the dedicated people He wants us to be. And that's an appeal to our own hearts. We can think, we can be more relaxed. Oh, that fire's not quite at our doorstep yet. But at such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man is coming. Let's watch and be ready, as the song goes. I didn't choose a closing hymn, but can we sing that as our closing hymn? We know not the hour of our Master's appearing. Yes, number 604, thank you. 604. We know not the hour of the Master's appearing, yet signs are foretell that the moment is nearing. This man shall return, every man wants his serene, but we know not the hour he will come. Let us watch and be ready, he will come. Hallelujah, hallelujah, he will come in the clouds of his Father's bright glory. But we know not the hour. There's light for the wise who are seeking salvation. There's truth in the word of the Lord's revelation. Each prophecy points to the great consummation, but we know not the hour he will come. Let us watch and be ready, he will come. Hallelujah, hallelujah, he will come.
let's bow our heads. Or why don't we stand for prayer? Okay. Our dear loving Father, we're so grateful that we could spend this time together. We thank you that your presence was here. And Lord, may we not become complacent. Help us to do the work that you've given us to do while there's still opportunity. And go with us, Lord, as we separate and go out from here. May your Holy Spirit guide us and give us your protection. In Jesus' name, amen.